Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Yvonne here from My Halal Kitchen, and I have a super guest for you today, Christina Adams, author of Camel Crazy. Hello, Christina.
Hi, Yvonne. It's wonderful to see you. We have had the pleasure of being in person 2 times now. So I
Yes.
feel like you're an old friend. And salam alaikum to everyone at My Halal Kitchen who's watching today.
Alaikum salam. It's so nice to have you back. We spent the day in Ramona, California, first time meeting, although we met on Twitter and a while back, right? Maybe even a year ago or so. It's been a while. And we kind of I was fascinated by your work about camels and talking about camels. And I remember first time I saw your tweets, I was like, what's going on here? No one ever talks about camels, but they're so interesting. And then you and I kind of just had a few exchanges. And then I asked if you'd be interested in interviewing, and here we are. So I'm so excited to talk about your book, Camel Crazy: A Quest for Miracles in the Mysterious World of Camels. Christina, you have a fascinating story. Can you please tell us how you went from Pentagon to research on camels and camel milk?
It is something that I could have never foreseen, but this is what life is like, right? What do
Yes,
they say when your life is what happens when you're making other plans? So
exactly.
yes, I'm actually a girl from Washington, D.C. and Virginia, and my family is from Virginia and that area for many, many years. And so I didn't grow up around anything like camels, just there were horses, and I might have seen, you know, uh, cows and all that, of course, but nothing that exotic in America as camels. So I started my career at the Pentagon, and I wanted to be a writer. I had a degree in English, so I did become a writer at the Pentagon. And I was able to edit a very large newspaper for the Washington, D.C. area, all about things going on in Washington with the Army and everything. So did that and did a lot of other things there in Washington, and then moved across the country and worked in aerospace in Los Angeles, public relations, things like that. But then I always wanted to go to graduate school, and I did that and started writing a book. But I had had a baby, and he was diagnosed with autism right when I finished graduate school. So I stopped writing my novel that I had won an award for at school. I was hoping to get it published, but autism just tends to take over everything. So I decided to do everything I could to help my son get healthier. And a lot of other mothers told me, remove regular milk. It helps make their autism worse, their symptoms. And try this special diet and try these doctors and do this therapy. And I did everything they said, and he got so much better. So I wrote my first book about that called A Real Boy, a true story of autism, early intervention and recovery. But that had put me into the biological space and the food space for autism. And
Okay.
so I would happen to be at a camel festival after my book came out. Well, not a camel festival, a book festival. My new life is camel festivals. My old life was book festivals. So yeah. So I was at a children's book festival, and I saw a camel, and I thought, why is it here if no children are riding this camel? So I was nosy and bored, and I was also a newly single mother, which is a very frightening situation when your child has autism. And I went over and saw this man that looked like the camel belonged to him, and he was selling soap and lotion from camel milk. And then I said, what else do they do with the milk? And he said they give it to premature infants in hospitals in the Middle East because it's thought to be non-allergenic. So I had my idea that might help boost my son's immune system, which always affected his autism symptoms. So I had to scramble around. There was no such thing as camel milk in America. I had to fly it in from Bedouins in the desert and Palestine area. It came in on El Al, Israeli Airlines, and I gave it to my son, and he got so much better overnight. It was incredible. So ever since then, I've been doing this.
When you say he got so much better, I'm sure everybody's wondering, what did that look like? What was the before and after? How long did that take? What did you see? I mean, you write about it in your book, but I think people watching would really want to know.
Yes, I'd be happy to share that because, I had hopes for it, but I could not have ever foreseen that it would be so, fast acting and amazing.
Yeah.
So for my son, and like a lot of children with autism, their diet affects how they function. And we know, of course, scientifically now that immune system function is connected to autism, ADHD, allergic response, gut issues. They're all kind of in this gut-brain allergic response axis together, so to speak. But at that time, nobody knew anything about camel milk, really. But after I had my idea, I had found an article by an Israeli veterinarian, and they had given some camel milk to some kids in Israel with autism, and they got better. But that was just a short-term improvement. Mm-hmm. So when I gave it to my son, I didn't know what to expect. But that the next morning, he had it at bedtime with cereal, and he had 4 ounces. And so the next morning, when he came down the stairs, he was very, very much a different boy as far as what he was doing and not doing. So he started eating breakfast, and a lot of our children with autism have impaired motor skills, and adults do too. That's actually one of the hallmarks of autism spectrum disorder is unusual motor skills, the way you move, the way you cut things, the way you walk. But he started cutting his food much more neatly, and his utensils weren't slipping all over. Food wasn't dropping on the floor, which is normal. Or sometimes
Tina, how old was he?
He was almost, he had just turned 9, actually.
Okay.
Yeah. And so then he said, who's taking me to school today? Who's picking me up? And he said things like, I really love you. You know, Mom, you do so much for me. You make my food, you make my medicines. Like this kind of emotional content in his language had not been there before. He said things like, you know, I'm going to get my shoes and get my backpack on. And he did it by himself. He didn't need prompting, which is a very big deal for children with autism to be able to do these things by themselves. That's called executive functioning, where you plan and carry out a task. And it was just unbelievable. And so that night when he came home from school, it was just shocking. It was much calmer. And then within a while, his skin started to clear up because he had these little white bumps on his skin, which was kind of a hallmark of allergic response. He didn't have your typical, you know, things where you'd need an EpiPen for allergic response, but he had that kind of slow chronic version. And I had thought it was under control, but it was not. So his skin started to clear up. And within 3 days, he was able to look both ways and cross the street without me hanging on to the back of his collar, which is a thing a lot of parents of children with autism have to do so they don't dart away. And he just continued to get incredibly better in his behavioral breakdowns, where he would just start going nuts and climb things and get out of control and get silly and giddy. Those just stopped. And whenever he would get out of balance again, I'd give him some camel milk and boom, 15 minutes, he's normalized.
15 minutes. So is this something that he's had to have all his life since that time? Is it something he's still taking now? And how old is he?
Well, this has been a long journey now because I had my idea in 2005 and, you know, he was 7 then. And so now he is 24 years old. Wow. So he had camel milk for years when he was still living in my house, you know, young enough to do that. And when he would go to, say, movie theaters with friends and drink like a big giant diet drink, which I didn't allow, but you can't control everything when they are away from you. So one time he did that, he came home and he was very aggressive and silly and obnoxious and just out of hand. And I gave him some camel milk. And within just 15 minutes, he calmed down again. He's like, I'm sorry. I didn't know why I was behaving that way. So he would take it regularly. And then we were able to stretch the amount out over time, which is something that I document as well in Camel Crazy. And, you know, the book does talk about that. And there's even a user's guide in the back. So everybody can learn how to use it for how they need it.
I love that. I was looking at that this morning, that you have charts in here that are amazing. You have vitamin concentration, properties of camel milk. You have composition. I mean, you really go into the science of this. And that's what I think is so interesting, that it's not just your personal experience. You have done research that is respected by the scientific community. So could you talk about that? Because I know people are probably wondering, you know, okay, that sounds great, but has it been proven? Where can we find this research? So tell us about the work you've done there.
Thank you for your interest in that. Yes, I was really trying to put everything that anyone with an interest in this topic would need in one book. And I'd like to think I did that, so thank you. when this happened, at first I didn't tell a lot of people, but I got permission from the federal government to import camel milk for my son. And so I'm probably the first person that's done that for their child. And then I had consulted with the doctor to make sure, that I got a letter to submit. So the doctors, I kind of had to educate them on it, but they were very convinced, like, yes. So I had the support of his doctors. And then after that, he was doing great on the milk, and I started researching it more, but there wasn't much research then. But then a couple years later in America, I found that camels were being milked by Amish farmers. And so I got that milk and I gave it to my son, and it worked the same way as the milk from the Middle East. So that was kind of the first patient in the world probably to experience two milks for the same condition from two different countries, two different types of camels. So scientifically, that was pretty important. And then when I realized it worked the same way, I thought, now I can write about it, because I was worried that people would just go crazy and start flying it in and not take the care that I had to work with the authorities and cause a problem. So I wrote an article called Got Camel Milk, and it went viral and helped kickstart the whole industry around the world. And then a year later, I wrote a medical journal article, which is peer reviewed, and it's called Autism Spectrum Disorder Treated with Camel Milk. And that was in Global Advances in Health and Medicine. And so that got the attention of a lot of science people. And just recently, it's got its 19th citation by researchers in the scientific literature.
You have done such amazing advocacy and the research. I mean, step by step, you were just, on it. And I can't imagine how tiring that must have been to document, to talk with the doctors, to convince them. I mean, how did you have the stamina, the persistence to do that? And because you really believed that this worked. So how did you go forward?
Well, I'm a very rational person. So, I'm willing to look at things that may be unconventional if it seems as if there's a good reason, but I'm very scientifically minded. So I was able to do things step by step. Like when I first gave him the camel milk, my son had already had tons of documentation and had been to doctors on a regular basis that documented his allergic responses, his white blood cell count. Like he already had a ton of data behind him. And so, and behavioral, data on how he was doing at school, with therapy, whatever. So this child already had a lot of documentation. So when I gave him the milk, it was very clear of his responses that I took track of. So then I did a calculation on all his behaviors, and that he had about a 30% symptom improvement. And I do not ever say the word cure, but it certainly can help ameliorate the conditions that help irritate our children and adults with autism, and be like an inflammation calmer and things like that can help them feel better and thus function better. And that's the goal. Help people with autism be the best they can be and not try to change them, help them be who they are and to feel better. So
and I asked how he's doing now, and you told me he's working, he's not living at home, so he's on his own, right?
Yeah, I mean, he lives pretty close by, and so he has friends. They do film projects, they do music.
Wow.
He's very creative, and he can draw really, really well. And he also, yes, he was in school for a couple of years. Now he's working, and he's really loving what he's doing. And the great thing about him is, I mean, we always have to assume that people with disabilities in general are mentally competent. A lot of people treat them like they don't understand or they're not competent. Exactly. Even people that are using wheelchairs, sometimes people will say to somebody else, what do they want to eat, instead of asking the person. So exactly. Yes, so we need to assume, that they are competent in their mind, even though with autism, it's very difficult to tell sometimes. But I always was sure, having hope that anything I could do to help him, increase his brain functionality, his health, his skills, I did, which was quite intensive. And I wrote about that in A Real Boy. But then, so basically, he is so smart now. That's what I'm trying to say. I mean, this child lost all his language, and he had to painfully get it back at the age of 3, sentence by sentence, word by word. Now, his vocabulary and his perception of things, he's so intellectual, far outstrips most people's. And he's just a nice guy too, which is really, really great. And he has his own theories on autism and things like that. He even noticed something interesting a few years ago when he was a kid. He said, there's this type of autism that some kids have. He said, in my mind, I see they kind of have a little bit puffy lips and they have a certain kind of nose, and they have a certain way they look. He said, these kids seem like there's a certain type. And I said, well, wow, that's pretty smart, because that can be caused by certain kinds of allergic response.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you just identified a little bit of the subtype yourself. I mean, he's so smart. So.
Wow. Well, he's got a smart mom. And I remember when we spoke, I asked you what he thought of your work, and I loved your response. Can you share that with everybody?
Well, he's really, he's a great guy. He's a very kind person, and he's very analytical. So he has seen what I've done over the years too. I always made sure early on to immerse him in the autism community, and I think people should do that. So he, when my first book came out, he was still a little boy, but I remember I was doing a book signing once, and that little clever fellow, he put a tip jar out and said he would sign the book. He ended up getting $25 or something.
Oh,
so
wow.
he did that. But now that this book is out, he's very, very proud of it. And one day I picked him up at school, at college, and he had a pin for my book on his backpack. And I said, oh, you got the pin for your Camel Crazy on your backpack. He goes, of course, Mom, why wouldn't I? Like, it's amazing. Like, everything you've done. Like, I just appreciate what you do. He says, I get scared sometimes if I hadn't had you, what would have happened to me? Yeah. So he's just very grateful,
Beautiful. I hope I can meet him sometime, because we don't live very, very far from each other. So
you'll get along great. Yeah, you'll get along great. And he likes to cook. So he makes a special, he likes Italian food. So he makes a special, it's bolognese with buffalo meat.
Interesting.
He feels it gives it a richer flavor. So,
wow. Definitely to meet him. And maybe we could do something with the camel milk, like make one of your smoothies or something, with camel milk powder.
Yeah, I have one today. I just got a delivery of fresh milk today, plus the powder I always have. So that was my lunch, and people want to see it. There's a little.
Yes, let's see. So Christina has the sort of travel size packets of camel milk powder. So you can use those as like coffee creamer. I use it as coffee creamer.
Yeah, coffee creamer. And then, of course, I've had camel milk tea made out of this powder with my Somali friends in San Diego. And then you can also do a lot of things with powder. I mean, I've made actual food with powdered milk. Like if I'm going to make like a vegan mac and cheese for somebody that's lactose intolerant, I can put the camel milk in there to give it the richness and creaminess. So you can do a lot of things with it.
Yeah, I brought this one back from our trip to the Oasis Camel Dairy in Ramona, and I've been using it ever since, because I use it in my coffee and my tea. I'll experiment more, but I just love the taste. And I was telling you right before we went on air that I was telling Christina that my cat actually is so attracted to smell. I think because it's so real. Animals really sense something when it's another animal product. And I just slightly opened the bag, and she was so interested. So I gave her some powder, and she ate it up. Wow. And she's really, really so picky, but she likes really real strong foods, like, something that's like a filler food or not really meaty. She won't touch it. So animals know too. They know quality, but this is great. So I'll put links up for you guys to get these things later, but let's move on to the statistics. So beyond what you've done for your son, you are doing so much for parents and people with autism to spread awareness and some solutions for alleviating symptoms. So can you tell us the global statistics, US statistics on autism? I mean, is it getting worse? Is it getting better? What's the data saying?
Well, when I started reading books when my son was diagnosed, the condition was considered extremely rare, and it was 1 in 10,000. Those were in the books. Mm-hmm. At the time he was diagnosed, it was thought to be maybe 1 in 5,000, US children or something. Mm-hmm. Then as the years rolled on, we went to 1 in 500, 1 in 250, 1 in 175, all these kind of numbers. And myself and the other parents are like watching, like, do people not know how catastrophic this is?
Exactly.
Um, and now it's, as of the data from 2016, it was 1 in 40 children in the US. However, if you go by parent type of data, it's actually more than that. It's really like, and it depends on state too. Because see, there's autism is not a diagnosis you really make medically. It's an observational diagnosis. So you
Mm,
have to get a psychiatrist or a neurologist or somebody
right.
to do this long assessment for this child to declare, okay, they have autism. Most people have a difficult time even accessing that process. So when you go into school records, which is another methodology they've chosen, school records, diagnosis, special education stuff, that will give you a truer picture of who's been diagnosed with autism. And so that can be quite high. Now, New Jersey has a very high rate. Last time I looked, it was 1 in 25 boys, maybe even lower now. I mean, it's really, really so much. And the Middle East is one of our top places in the world where they have very high rates. Some of the top countries in the world are in the Middle East for a high autism prevalence. And people often say, like, oh, it's just greater identification. No, it is not. I'm here to dispel that because, you certainly, they have ruled out, there's a population that you would have called, back in the day, they would have used the word mentally retarded. We do not say that anymore. We say intellectual disability. So they would have, maybe some of those people would have been declared intellectually disabled, whereas now they would be called autistic. So that's fine. That's a certain percentage. Then there's certain states would say, oh, people are moving here to get services, so they're going to be more of them. They've ruled that out too for California. So basically, all you have to do is look at the schools and the service providers. They did not exist. There was no way that you had all these children now that are swamping the special education systems, the behavioral support systems that are out there. They did not exist. It's hard to miss a child with autism. I mean, it's really hard when they don't speak or their speech is really, not functional, and they just really have a hard time sitting in a classroom and doing the things they're supposed to do. So to me, they just didn't exist. And if you go to any school system and ask teachers from way back, they'll know that they didn't exist until now.
Well, it seems also that if it takes school observation to get some answers, that's kind of late, because by then they're already 6, 7 years old, and parents would have been dealing with a lot of unknowns until then.
And this is an issue of access, and it affects people of color more than white people. Children of color are often much later diagnosed and much later to get services, and that's really unfair. And really, nobody wants to diagnose a child with autism. Nobody wants to pay for those services either. This is not an easy diagnosis to get. It is not overdiagnosed. Yes, there are children now that we know have Asperger's or have, on the spectrum, which is more mild traits of it. And those are the kids that we are catching now that we didn't catch before, that were labeled ADHD or they just weren't caught. But that's not enough to cause this giant wave of autism diagnoses. So that's pretty common knowledge. And every country is facing this. So when I go to countries, I often will get involved with the special education system there or go to speak to autism groups. And then I put the Camel people together with the autism people or the special education people. And I try to help them, know the latest and what's going on in their services and what they can get and the biology aspects and the medicine. I can refer them to different doctors, things like that. So I try to put the two together. And most countries are, facing this issue as a rising thing to be dealt with.
So would you say that with the awareness or reemergence of camel milk as a food that helps the symptoms of autism, would you say that there's more of an acceptance of this food as medicine in a way?
Well, this is the interesting part about it, because I've been doing it so long, and I'm pretty much the person that kind of helped get this started globally. Mm-hmm. So used to, people would look at you like you're crazy. But then over the years, people started saying, oh, that makes sense. Okay, well, that's interesting. And
Mhm.
then now it's really not that unusual anymore if you're in that space of natural food or trying to help, people feel better with their different conditions, because it's not just autism that can help, it's other things. And then, so I also always am clear to say that it doesn't help all autism, but it helps quite a few that are on the autism spectrum. And if you get Camel crazy, it'll tell you some of the things to watch out for to see if your child might actually, be the one benefited from it. But this is the other thing about the science part. So I don't argue with doctors. I know a lot of things about these things. So they have their place and things that they do, which, you always need. But on the other hand, those of us that become specialists in certain topics, we're able to keep up on things, but they don't have the time.
Right.
So,
That's a
often, yeah, I end up giving lectures to, people that take that information and use it, that haven't heard it at science conferences and things like that. So I think the proof is in the pudding, because
Yes.
when I started this, I'm flying, $1,700 bottles, suitcase of bottles over and giving it to my son. And now the industry has just taken off around the world and is taking off quite a bit right now. It's projected to grow 7 to 10% in the next decade, and the camel milk. And then people are just using it, and the demand is so high, and it's everywhere. So if you just wait for somebody to approve it, why? I mean, it's being used. I think it would be good if it was ever approved, but it's not a patentable drug. Therefore, there's no financial incentive to do clinical trials and prove, find that molecule, isolate it, turn it into a drug compound, spend millions and millions of dollars to get it approved by the FDA, because people will just buy the milk. So here we are doing our thing.
I think that in the food community or culinary community, I think, those of us who are just really interested in just overall global health, individual health and wellness, this is something that is super fascinating, but also kind of we're sort of ready to embrace it. And I just want to point out that Joel Salatin writing your foreword was a really interesting piece of this of me learning about your book. So for those of you who don't know Joel Salatin, he's a famous farmer from Virginia, right?
Yes, right? And an author of like 12 books. And
yeah. I started listening to him many years ago when I started my site, and the man is just amazing. People have to listen to him and hear what he has to say about regenerative farming, the health of animals. I think he was in Food Inc. or one of those, probably he's in many documentaries, but tell us how that came to be. How did you meet him? How did you get him to write the foreword? What does he think of camel milk and the work you do?
Well, I was very fortunate to have him interested in doing that and agree to do that, because he is really an amazing man. He is super passionate about regenerative, local, wholesome agriculture. And that is phenomenal. I'm sure he's a bit ahead of his time too.
Yes.
So I've always been involved in all aspects of this thing. So yeah, I do a lot of media on it, but I'm also behind the scenes, digging into science, helping, I'm in a lot of different aspects of this. So basically there was a place called Farm to Consumer Legal Defense Fund, and they were helping defend farmers who were doing things that were, a little bit different. Not necessarily breaking the law, but just things that were a little bit unusual. So like, say they want to, do meat in a new way or something, and, somebody wants to make a complaint or something like that. So, I wasn't really heavily involved in it, but I was aware of it. So there was a person at Farm to Consumer Legal Defense Fund, because they had taken an interest in camel milk, reached out to me. So I was always educating them about that. So they said, oh, I know Joel Salatin. Your book sounds phenomenal. So let me make an introduction. And so, that's how it happened. And he's a very passionate writer, and yes. I love what he said in the foreword. So I'm just really grateful for that. And yeah, it was a great Virginia connection.
Yeah, exactly. You're both from there. So, so I want to tap into, well, first let's watch a short video of yours about the benefits of camel milk, and then let's talk about the milk's restorative power and how this is sort of it's something that in the Middle East, people kind of, you are actually bringing a reminder to the culture there that, hey, this is awesome, and this is something we need to reincorporate into society. So let's do the video first and see if that can pop up on our feed. I think
benefits of camel milk. They are more.
There we go.
So as far as the benefits of camel milk, they are more than I ever imagined. Back when I started, I just had that original idea that I thought it might reboot my son's immune system, which was always connected to his symptoms of autism and his speech. So it exceeded my expectations, and I've written a medical journal article about it, which has now been cited 19 times thanks to these kind of amazing animals. But it also is shown now in studies, as well as, of course, widely reported anecdotal reports, that it is useful for diabetes type 1 and 2, gut disorders, skin conditions, all kinds of things like that. Anything that involves inflammation, generally camel milk can be beneficial for. So all that information is contained in my book. I have a user's guide that explains the health conditions and then what it's used for. And so people want to know, what is so special about camel milk that it can do some of these kind of things? So first of all, nomadic people have known about the healing properties of camel milk for centuries, but that kind of knowledge has been lost kind of today. The more that people move away from the land of nomadic traditions, the more they lose that knowledge. So my son's experience and then my research sort of kind of jump-started people looking at this again. And so ever since then, people are doing more experiments. There's more universities involved in looking at the camel milk. So now we know that it has very unique properties. It has incredible enzymes, which have antibacterial and antiviral effects. The casein is different than the casein in cow milk, so it doesn't have that property that exacerbates kind of issues in people that can't tolerate cow milk or goat milk. It also has insulin that is in a bigger kind of container, so it seems as if it's survivable through the gut, and thus might be uptake, be available for easier uptake for people that need insulin, such as diabetics. And so there's some other incredible things. It has amazing essential fatty acids, and also has GABA, which sometimes can be very useful. And so there are many, many things to know about camel milk, and we're so lucky that more and more information is coming out every single day. And it is just my privilege to spend time with the people that take care of these incredible animals. They are also being used for development for vaccines and things like that for COVID-19. So the labs are looking at them, but we here on the land, people that get to spend time around camels, we know that there's a lot of knowledge about them that needs to come into today's world.
Oh, that was wonderful. That was from our day at the Oasis Camel Dairy in Ramona. The camels were so friendly.
That made me laugh so hard. Well, I'm like, look at that woman. She's doing everything she can to keep that camel happy while she's trying to do this at the same time.
I give you credit for
which is yeah. That was really funny. Yeah, camels, they're really big and
huge.
They can move that head around and they can get you from any angle.
Yes,
and they're usually just honestly super sweet, curious, loving, which is, as you could see, that camel was.
Yeah.
But, I like to keep them happy and know where they are. So
very curious. And I know I had posted a video of my experience with, I was trying to do a selfie type of video, and the camel was just kind of like eating my hair. I was so interested, and everybody was so worried about me. I'm like, I wasn't worried at all. They were fine. And I think they just feel your energy too. Like, there wasn't nothing to be worried about. And of course, the camel whisperer Gil was right there, just watching. So they are amazing creatures. And I think like what would you say are some of the top kind of most interesting characteristics of them, like in terms of how long they can go without water, the strenuous activity they can take, or just anything kind of fascinating that most of us might not know?
Yeah, well, the more I dug into this, the more I realized this animal is astonishing. When I first saw a camel, or I'd seen them around, I'm like, big brown animal, whatever. But the more that I started learning about them, the more I realized, wow, these things are beyond in their biological functioning. Yeah. And So I guess some of the interesting things are that, first of all, it has all these incredible ways it can survive in these really extreme climates, intense cold as well as intense heat. And in the dry lands, as we call these very arid lands where a lot of them are located. So they have something unique in biology. It's an oval blood cell. So their blood cells can dehydrate and they squish down like a football when they're really dehydrated and there's no water in the desert. But then when they get a lot of water, of course, they can suck up, huge amounts of water in just a very short period of time. And those blood cells, they rehydrate super quickly. And that would kill a regular kind of mammal. But the camel is totally fine with it. And then the camel also has a recycling system for its water. So it will actually, like, it can, things come out the nose and it will go in the mouth. Like, when it exhales, the perspiration will go in the mouth and it kind of recycles its moisture really well. It also has like clear inner eyelid that will close when sand is coming and things like that. So it can still see, but its eyelid is covered.
Wow.
So just incredible. And then the list goes on and on. It has this really interesting heart-shaped kind of tough leathery patch on its chest. So when it gets down on the sand, that leathery patch protects it. That is so amazing. And the way it moves, it's so weirdly jointed. It just goes down in pieces like a rocking.
Yes, I felt that when I was many years ago in Morocco, when I was, you do the camel ride tours. And my only experience with riding an animal was a horse, but the weird way that at first I was scared. I realized I had nothing to be scared of, but it was just a first experience that they kind of, they're on their knees when you get on them, right? You don't use a saddle to like jump on them because they're too high up. But as they're getting up, it's just, you can kind of feel the joints in their knees, or the way they're moving is forward and back and forward and back until they lift you up. And then you realize how high up you are. And they're just gentle giants at that point. I can't believe how much they can carry.
And then you feel like a princess in an old, old ancient like procession through town.
Right? So elegant in the way that they, walk, and you're not hurried or anything, and and when they dismount you, it's the same gentle way. It's like letting you off nicely, peacefully. I don't know. It's just a very interesting experience. It was so different from a horse. It's just nothing like it.
Yes. And camels are called ship of the desert because, first of all, they do literally transport, things that have helped build our civilization for centuries through the Silk Road and all these other places like the ships. But then second of all, they have a very unique way of walking called a pace, where their legs move this way on either side. It's very unusual. And then it causes them to rock like a ship in the desert.
Yes. It's very calming, actually. Yeah. I felt very at ease on the camel, like as if it was like almost like you're on water in a way. It's really interesting. Everybody, well, I think there are camel tours at the Oasis Camel Dairy in Ramona, right? People can ride them there. I think at least kids.
People can. And one of the good things that people do for camel rides in America, they want to take the stress off the camel getting up and down repeatedly. So the owners will build a platform and you just climb the steps and then whoop, you swing right onto the saddle, you walk around, come back, go down the steps. And Oasis does that. Yeah. Yeah.
Gil and Nancy, they are amazing people. And I remember they're the owners of the Oasis. When I first arrived, and Gil and I were talking about how much the camels stress they can take, and the intensity of the environment that they can handle. He said, they just kind of go into a zone at that point. Because I said, well, I feel bad when I hear those stories, like how much they endure. He said, they just go into a zone, and they just kind of like they're kind of. He didn't use the word Zen-like, but in that sense, sort of like that they're focused on handling it, and then they slowly come out of it. And I thought, now that's something I've never heard of any animal doing, that they're just sort of mentally able to take on any challenge.
Yeah, it's really amazing. I mean, they have a very, very minimal startle reflex. Now, they do startle sometimes with
Mhm.
certain things, but overall, a lot less than horses and things like that.
Mhm.
So, but there's very little research on that. I tried to research the startle reflex in camels, and there's not too much published on that. But they are pretty amazing. There's a very famous shot that I see in my camel world, and it's of a camel coming through, I think, the Khyber Pass, and
Mhm.
on its back is like the tractor of a Mack truck, and it's carrying that through the Khyber Pass, and it's incredible. And I've seen some amazing stuff. There's even a sport in India during the Camel Festival, but not just there, other places too, where like they will camels they can leap, they can dance. Some people are like, oh, I don't know if they should be doing that or not. But my philosophy is that's their culture. If it's not, harming the camel terribly, I'm not going to get involved in that. But because that's their heritage. So, but the camels can do all kinds of amazing things. And then there's one where they line up all these camels, like they start with 2 or 3, and then young men, they run and run and run, and they leap in the air over the camels and land in the sand. And then they keep lining up more and more. And these young men just basically soar through the air, and whoever jumps most camels is like the winner.
It's like their Olympics, their games. Wow. Yeah, and so integral to different cultures and societies. I know one of the camels looked like it was molting. And I asked Gil about it because I could tell, and it was hot. And he said he came by and he brought me the hair and he showed it to me and let me feel it. And I thought, wow, how soft it was. And it's amazing because the camel, just like many other animals and many cultures, they provide so much of themselves to let the locals take care, use. So camel hair is spun, right? It's spun for wool or to make sweaters, coats, whatever. I mean, people literally live off these animals entirely in some parts of the world. The milk, the meat, the hair, all of it.
As you know, I've mentioned that I went to Saudi Arabia in December, returned in January. I went to the King Abdulaziz Camel Festival, and they had their first International Camel Conference to discuss the economic and scientific importance of camels. And so I was lucky to be invited to speak at that. So when I was there, I was able to really do some more research in talking to Bedouins and talking to locals, and really learn some amazing things, and talking about living off camel milk. So that's always been a thing. The Somali people, which I talk about in my book, they're like, when they're young boys, they go off and live in the jungle off camel milk alone, for 2 years or something. And they feel it makes them healthier long term. So that I happened to be in a Bedouin tent in Saudi. And then I was talking to the Bedouins there with the translator. And I asked him, do you have any stories of people living off camel milk, making them healthy? And he said, my grandmother was a young woman and she didn't like where she lived in Saudi. She left her tribe and she took her 4 camels and she walked for like months and months and months, like 4 months. And there was no water for the camels. And so when she finally got to this place where there was water for the camels, it wasn't potable for her. So she lived off that milk alone, not even water, for 4 years. And then she was found by somebody from her tribe and said, let's bring you home. She said, no, I don't want to go. There's no water for my camels to get back. But somehow they got her back. And then only now is she starting to be ill as an old lady. She's been in great health until she's very old.
Wow. Yeah, I have had friends from that part of the world who would tell me that most of the time, because I had asked this question years ago, like, most people from the Middle East raised on camel milk, just thinking that was the norm. And they had said, it used to be maybe many, many generations ago, but now it's more if somebody's sick, they'll go to a farm and drink the milk. It's more of a knee-jerk reaction to a sickness. So that brings me to my next question for you. Or you mentioned in your book, the great camel cultures of the Middle East have mostly lost their knowledge of the milk's restorative power, and that it operates on the fringe, a social, legal, no man's land. I thought that was so powerful because it's surprising to hear, quite honestly. Can you tell us about that?
Well, camel milk is an ancient substance with modern uses. So it's been around for centuries. They've known that it has a healing power, and this is all the cultures that have them pretty much have that tradition. But as we move away from modern living and as Bedouins in many places get settled, and camels are always on the outside of cities usually. I mean, you'll see some in cities and all that, but usually the communities are rural, pastoralist, nomadic. Of course, in some places they have large farms, but that's in Saudi Arabia, they have that, in the Middle East. But most of the places, they're just more outside, like the pastoralists themselves are not settled. So these people's knowledge has gotten lost. And, autism has existed before, probably always there's been cases of autism, but it was very, very rare and unusual. So now these illnesses that are more, and autism is not just an illness, but there are, illness aspects of it for people that are aware that, yes, it's not, we don't want to just say, oh, they're so sick all the time. I mean, there are people that are very intelligent, of course, that have autism, but there are known immune function problems and comorbidities with autism. So that's what I'm trying to say. So now that they have this situation where a lot of people are having these disorders, also food allergies, ADHD, things like that, a lot of this is connected to sort of our environmental triggers. And so this is rising everywhere. And so nobody has a lot of solutions for those. It's very difficult to develop drugs that treat neurological conditions. And that's a known thing in the pharma industry. And so many of them have bad side effects. So when you start looking around, like, wow, what's out there that can make us feel good and feel better and is a healthy organic thing, hey, then now people are more willing to look at what was out there before. And of course, in the Quran, verse 8817, I think, that they talk about, will they not look at the camel, how it is created, and that it is made for you to eat and drink of. And then there's stories about, people that have experienced those things as outlined in the Quran. So people know in the Middle East and the Muslim world, they know that camels are supposed to be good and good for them because of that. But they do really have lost touch with the milk. So a lot of people in Saudi also, they have this thing, and I joke about it in the book. They think that camel milk will give you diarrhea automatically. Oh, give you diarrhea.
Really?
So it's like a myth that they have. And so, but I'm not saying that there's not some truth to it. So I hear it over and over. But it turns out it's probably not the milk itself. It's probably, where did you get it? Was it in a roadside container? Was it from a camel that wasn't handled properly?
Exactly.
So I would say it's probably a hygiene thing, because a lot of people do just get it from some sources. So, and then some people, like the Somali people said, it's like a car flushing system. He meant to say car wash, but that's actually not true. If you just get typical milk, clean, nice, safe milk from a good farm or source, I don't hear people really report that.
That's true of any raw milk. I mean, I've been a raw milk advocate for years, and I used to get it in Chicago and other places. And I've even had it overseas, but I always have checked, the farmer, the equipment, is it clean? And that's with anything. But yeah, we always have to be careful and safe. But now there's so many products available and different ways to consume it. So let's watch the next short video clip that we have about your suggestions for camel milk products. This is a good one. Let me go back. Christina, you have so much experience with camels, and you've been all over the world researching them and learning more and more about them. My only experience with camels is having ridden once in Morocco, and that was a really cool experience. But there are places in the world that I didn't even realize had camels. Like you mentioned Missouri a few minutes ago. You mentioned Pakistan in your book. I mean, I really only associated camels with North Africa and the Gulf countries and the Middle East. And you have such an interesting take on how camels really kind of bring people together and bridge bridge cultures. Can you tell us more about that? What have you learned, and what insight do you have about that topic?
I would love to talk about that, because the camel to me has changed my life in a way that I could have never seen. When I first learned about camels, my original concept was that, oh, they're in Egypt with the pyramids and they probably all died a long time ago.
Exactly.
That's all I knew.
Exactly.
So when I met the camel, it set me on this odyssey among camel people. And what I realized, my original impetus for this was I was the mother of a sick child. And so I reached out to people that I normally wouldn't meet, people from different parts of the world that happened to be in America, and they connected me beyond. So the kindness that was shown to me by people of the Muslim faith, of the Hindu faith, of any type of person that had something, knowledge to camels, a bridge to camels that I didn't have and they were sharing with me, their kindness and their hospitality was just remarkable. And so that showed me, like, in a way in my own life, to be a better hostess, to be a better, more comfortable with other cultures, because people are people. We all want the same things. And if you have a sick child, you want your child to just be better. And so also one thing I've determined is, my first book was about autism, and usually mothers would come to me and talk about that, because a large burden of this generally falls on mothers taking care of their children. But with the camels, the fathers love it. The fathers love to come out and ask me, how can I get camel milk? There's something about camels that attracts them. And anything that brings fathers into this picture of caring for their family is wonderful. Additionally, I would like to say that the camel people oftentimes...
I'm going to stop it there because that was actually the wrong video, but I'll put a link to that one. It got a little hard to hear because it was windy that day. But let's remove this, and I'll put a link to the products in the comment section. But yeah, in that video, you did talk about Nuke Dubai, the gelato that we both had, and the dried versus the raw, and things like that. So where do you buy your camel milk, and what farms are available in the US where people can maybe even go and get the products, or where would you suggest people start?
So because one of the number one things people ask me is, okay, what does it taste like, and what did it really do for your child? Is it true? Then after that, they say, okay, where can I get it, and how do I use it? So that's why in the book Camel Crazy, I tell the whole story and all kinds of things, but in the back, I have a user's guide that explains not only how do you use it, how do you prepare for it, how much do you give, how long do you have to take it, all storage, all these kind of things. I actually have a guide on in the back on where to get it. So I have a list of farms from all over the world in there.
Yes.
So I would say that's a very good resource. Now also, you can get it online. Now you can order powder online. You can order liquid online. Every country seems to have its source now. But I really like to patronize our farmers who are on the land. Many of them are Amish Mennonite, not all of them. Mm-hmm. But these are people that really work hard. Camel dairies are very labor intensive. So if you don't have a ton of really free labor, it's kind of tough to have one. So, and no labor is free. I'm not saying that, but the Amish people, they're very communitarian. They very much like working on the land, and they stick together to help each other. So I have visited several of these farms, and they do a lot of really good work. So ordering from the farmer, I think, is really good. And you can do that. In the back of my book, I mentioned it, but yeah, there's humpback dairy. There's different ones. Some of them are very low tech, though. Remember, if they're Amish, sometimes they don't want to get on camera. They don't.
Right.
The websites may not be the best, but that's fine. So
right, as long as there's milk, Yeah.
But you can get it. You can get camel milk anywhere now. And I will say, now some places you can get raw milk, but you may be a little bit nervous about that. Now in America, we do not have MERS. We have very low incidence of issues with camel health in America. You always have to worry about, certain things like brucellosis or tuberculosis. But, here in America, our camels are pretty well taken care of. We haven't had an issue. So you can drink raw pretty safely here if you get it from one of our good farmers. In the other countries, it could be a little bit trickier to make sure that your raw supply is safe. So I would say if you want to get it and you know that the camels are healthy, they've had veterinary care, it's from a reputable place, then, that's your choice. But You can also get raw. And then in the back of the book, I have a home pasteurization method, very
Yeah.
quick, that teaches you how to flash pasteurize it. Super
Mhm.
easy. And then also you can get the powders, you can get the flash pasteurized liquid, spray dried, whatever your need is. And now there's up and coming cheese products in India
Interesting.
and yogurts in different places. And in Pakistan, they're doing an ice cream project at a university that I've spoken at there. And I just got invited for World Camel Day as June the 22nd to give an address to some
Oh,
great camel people in Pakistan. So things are looking up on the product front.
yeah. So one question I would have for you is that, because I know I've seen camel milk online on Amazon, but it's not raw, the liquid. So does that give the same results?
Well, here's the thing. When I say the thing you asked me about before, does it exist? It exists in a no man's land.
Mhm.
Globally, camel milk is traditionally aligned with pastoralists who don't have a lot of power and who don't have a lot of access to technology either, and marketing and things like that. And
Right.
a lot of the laws have been made without regard to what the pastoralists need to keep their camels functioning well. So that's part of that issue. But then in America, raw milk is legal state by state. And last time I looked, 43 states in America had some form of raw milk that was legal.
Right.
But it's really, how complicated is it to get it from place to place or whatever. But really, it's something that the consumer can choose a lot of different ways to get it. If you go online, you can get the form that you want delivered to you.
Right.
And if you're in a state that you have a farm nearby, then you can drive to pick it up and enjoy a great day, because a day with camels is a great day.
It's
So
much fun. One thing I learned from hanging out with you was that they're not just in the western states with deserts. I mean, I thought that only the camels were like in Arizona and California, but you mentioned they were in Missouri and other places. And I've been in Minnesota. I was in Minneapolis years ago. There was a bakery called Crescent Bakery. They were famous for their pizzas, but I believe they were Somali owned, and they sold in their meat case, they sold camel meat, and they offered camel meat burgers. Have you ever heard of them?
oh, yes, and I haven't heard that bakery, but I have tried. Back when it was more difficult, I was always trying to reach out to these kind of people. So it was hard to get in touch with a lot of them. But I'm aware that there's been ones here and there. But yeah, so now, the first time I ever had camel meat was in Dubai, because at a restaurant you can get hamburgers, hot dogs, stir-fried camel, things like that. It's not common over there, but you can still get it pretty easily. But
Wow.
a couple of years ago, my husband was in San Diego, and he was at a trendy restaurant, and he saw on the menu tacos, and one of the tacos was camel. So he had to order it, of course, because he's done so much of this with me. And then he said to the guy, "Oh, you have camel meat?" And he goes, "Yeah, I don't know anything about it." My husband said, "I bet it's from Australia." And the guy went and checked, and he goes, "Yes, it is." So yeah, we're getting meat because they have a big feral population of camels over there.
Wow.
Yeah, so I don't know for sure the meat comes from the feral camels, but I wouldn't be surprised if it did.
I wonder if it's halal too. We'll have to figure that out.
Yeah, we'll have to figure that out. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think in the store in Minneapolis, I think it had to do with the huge Somali population
Yes.
there. So you've mentioned the Somalis a few times, and would you say that in the US they might be like some of the biggest advocates or educators or proponents of camel milk and camel products? I mean, it seems like you've got a really good relationship with that community.
Well, I wouldn't say proponents or advocates, because typically they've had a lot on their plate, as people that a lot of them came here after their, Civil War, and have had a lot of challenges. And, they've had a tough time here, but they do great. They're doing very well now. Not all of them, but lots of them are doing very well in Minneapolis and things like that. But they know about the camels. They know about this. And so they have that recognition of the camel's value and the milk and the meat. So they're like the, heritage storehouse of knowledge here. I'm sure there's some other ones too, but that's a major community because, as I say in the book, Somalia is the most camel crazy country in the world. They are all about the camel. They have a state camel. They have, just amazing amount of camels too. And I actually just donated 4 books to Somaliland universities because a doctor asked me for a couple of them. He had a hard time getting them there or affording them there in Somaliland, which is kind of a breakaway section of Somalia. And so now there's 4 copies of the book in these Somaliland universities. So, they know about it and they want it. They do generally look at it as something that should be a big volume of milk and not cost a lot. And camel milk is kind of costly because it doesn't produce nearly as much as a cow and it's pretty labor intensive, but they like it, the biggest container they can get at the best price.
Yeah. It seems like, well, if the demand is increasing, maybe we'll be able to get the prices down. And that's true with anything good. People have to learn more about it and demand more of it. And like I always say with organic stuff and great food, I mean, consumers have to demand it and purchase it, and then hopefully prices can come down later. Yes. So I just want to bring attention to the back of your book, which does have all these resources. So you have lists of U.S. distributors, U.S. farmers, international sources, so much information here. So, I'll post a couple of links. For example, the farm that we went to here in California, and at that farm, I just want to clarify. So people might be asking that you cannot get raw camel milk there at the farm in Ramona, but you can get the powdered milk there, Oasis Camel Dairy. You can get chocolates. And I got the coffee chocolate and the classic chocolate, and oh my goodness, was it so good. And the almond chocolate. And I also got lip tint made with camel milk, and it's the softest stuff on my lips. I love it so much. And they're making soaps and all kinds of stuff there too. So that's really interesting. Like there's so many uses and utilities of camel products. And I think that more and more people will know about them and hopefully purchase and support these farmers who are doing amazing things to keep them healthy and safe and educate us about them.
Yes. And other countries are starting to grow their own industries now too, including Mongolia. Mongolia has Bactrian camels, and it's very exciting that they have so many. And so they're trying to develop a milk industry out of there too. So
the Bactrians have 2 humps, right?
Yes, that's the 2. Yeah. Dromedaries have 1 like that. And then the Bactrians have, whoop, whoop, humps like that. And people that ride them sit in the middle. So the Bactrian camel. So it's kind of, when you see pictures, they're kind of dwarfed by the humps when they're sitting in the middle.
Right. Yeah. So. You really re-instilled an interest in camels for me. I was interested, many years ago when I had first gone to Morocco, and but we just don't know enough about them here. And now I've learned like it's was a sort of dying source of knowledge in the rest of the world. But you are like single-handedly revitalizing this whole topic and all the benefits, and the world is better for your existence and your hard work and your just persistence on being so camel crazy. I think you're going to make the rest of us camel crazy too.
It can happen. And believe me, I never, ever, ever in a million years thought that I would be in this situation and wearing a beautiful abaya from Saudi Arabia. And
it is gorgeous.
Well, I did an interview today where I needed to wear, my headscarf, and I thought, why not wear the abaya with it? So anyway. So I tell you, it's really been an amazing thing. I still, to myself, wonder what happened to my life, but it's pretty interesting. So every time I think like, okay, I'm done, then something else amazing happens. So I don't know if I'll ever be done. So.
That happens when you're passionate about what you do, I think. And I think you're onto something so fascinating. And it's already taken you on such a fascinating journey, but I can see that it's sort of just the tip of the iceberg in a way. You have a lot more to do.
There's a lot more to do, and it's going and going. And, the greatest thing also is not only are we helping the camel to not die out, I'd like to think that we're giving the pastoralists some new respect, which they deserve. Right. Yes. And then also the main drivers of this are the users of the milk. The main customers of the milk in India are parents of children with autism. And then during the lockdown, the milk was used a lot for these people with tuberculosis who have improved, like reported tons of tremendous success. And that is due to Dr. Ilse Kohler-Roelofsen. I mentioned her in my book. She's a really important person in India with their partner Hanwant Singh Rathore. They have got Camel Charisma, and they have been supplying this milk to these really, really challenged populations, and it's benefiting them a lot. So, the proof is in the pudding, basically. If this didn't work, nobody would be using it. Plus, even if you don't have a chronic health condition, it's a super healthy, incredible source of nutrition. So, and it's fun to serve at parties, so why not?
Yeah, well, that's a good idea. I mean, I've been, ever since we visited the farm, I've been using the camel milk and as much as I can, and I don't have the stomach issues that I have with cow milk. And I love milk and creamy things, and I even buy like the Parmalat Italian milk because I thought that would be better for my stomach. But nothing has really, I mean, it doesn't even affect me at all when I drink this milk. So it's really fascinating. And one more thing before we go, I know even in my own family, and I myself have been pre-diabetic before, and I always worry about that, getting into the next stage. So with diabetes, do you have any links to articles, research on the effect of camel milk on sugar levels or insulin or anything to do with diabetes? If you do, I'd love for you to share those at some point later. We can put it in our website article about this video, because I think that's another condition that is really of interest to all of us, unfortunately. But if there are solutions with the camel milk, I think we would really we really need to know.
Well, this is very important because diabetes is on the rise in many, many countries.
Yes.
Is it Qatar or Kuwait? One of those countries has like the highest rate of overweight children. And, that's going to predispose them a lot. So I do talk about diabetes a lot. I don't, in the back of the book, I actually have serving sizes for diabetes type 1 and 2. And this is based on the studies. And, it talks about in most of the studies, this is the recommended amount. It led to improvement of the diabetes markers, which is, of course, the A1C. And then there's other things. And then there's also, now when they do studies, a lot of times I'll do it on rats, diabetic rats. So that's typical, you use rats for lab experiments, but there's human studies going on now here and there too, with camel milk for different things. But for diabetes, it's interesting. There is a person, actually not too far, she's right between the both of us in California, and she's mentioned in the book, but I keep up with her. Her name is Rena Solomon, so she's fine with this being public. She developed a diabetes as an adult, and it was very, very bad. And she was on all these medications, and she had all this pain in her hands and all kinds of things. So she heard about camel milk. She tried it. She felt that it helped, but she felt that it didn't help as much as it could. So then she got raw milk, frozen, and it helped. But then she realized when she had fresh milk straight from the camel, it was incredible for her symptoms. And so she actually got herself some camels. So
yes, people are buying camels.
She's got a herd now, and she's a very intrepid woman. This woman goes out and fights fires, helps in disasters. So this is not something you should try at home, kids.
Right? No.
Yeah, but she now just got even more camels. I think they just had babies. So she reported that when she's on certain amounts, like she was able to go off like so many different medications, and the pain in the hands went away, and her A1C went down. And so she's looking at all those markers. And so she's a really good example of some of the other cases. That is not the only case I've ever heard of. So other people use it. So this is Dr. Agarwal in India is one of the people that really looks into this issue, but there's probably going to be more coming out. The difficulty with diabetes patients looking at this is diabetes is so medicalized, a lot of people just want to take the pill, or they want to, take this medication, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the lifestyle aspect can be very beneficial, but it's hard for people to learn about it and deal with it. So I do think taking camel milk could really, it's my personal belief that it will probably help forestall a lot of health issues in certain people that may be predisposed. So that's That's the way I look at it. And I've heard many anecdotal, cases. Like there's a woman in Oman who's very well known. She had breast cancer 25, 30 years ago, and she drank a lot of camel milk and did other things. And then she was okay. But then she got her own camels also, and she's had that milk for 25 years, and she's never had a reoccurrence of breast cancer.
And that goes against a lot of the conventional knowledge that adults just shouldn't have any milk at all.
Right. And for women, when they get, a lot of women, deal with weight gain as they get older, or they deal with bone loss as they get older. So a lot of studies that didn't have anything to do with camel milk show a little bit of lower fat dairy is beneficial to these type of situations. So I like to have camel milk for all those reasons, but I think it's great for a lot of different reasons. Now, again, I'm a scientifically minded person, so I know just pointing out one anecdotal case doesn't prove X, Y, and Z. So you don't need to at me about that, all you science types, because we're on the same page. But exactly. Anecdote is the tip of the iceberg that can tell us there may be something there that were we to get enough funding, we could look at.
Right. And exactly. That's why I love the work you do. And I feel so comfortable, just really touting everything, because you are so thorough. And like you said, you're a very logical person, and you did all this analytical data gathering, with your son, and just the journey you've been on. I mean, it's just been incredible. And you're very responsible about what you say and how you say it and how you present it. And I think we need more of that when it comes to, talking about food as alleviating symptoms of conditions and things like that. More people really need to have that sort of approach, I think, yeah.
Thank you. It's not a, clickbait topic, but
no, not at all.
But it's worth digging into for a lot of reasons, I think. But don't worry, you don't have to dig into it as much as I have, because that's already right here.
Everything is here. I think so. For those of you watching who find this interesting enough to just want to learn more, Christina's done all the work in this book, Camel Crazy. So I'll put links up to the book, to the Oasis dairy that we went to in Ramona, California, and some of the products that you can buy, and also the videos that we shot with Christina at Oasis Camel Dairy in Ramona. So
thank you. And I will say, for all of us out there, it's really tough sometimes just to live in this world. And
it is.
I started this chapter of this life of mine in a really tough situation. And it took me to a global journey and a place of happiness and amazing things that I never expected. So it's a good read, I'd like to think, to make you feel like you can kind of do things that you never thought you could do. And I hope you'll come along and join me on that journey.
And the love of a mother can move mountains.
Yeah. We can't move mountains and fly you to distant continents and all these things.
Can move mountains and become camel crazy.
Yeah.
Christina, thank you so much for all that you do for your family, the world around us. I mean, you're an amazing person, and I'm just so blessed to know you.
Thank you very much. And I hope people will join me on social media. Happy to connect with you and keep me posted on your own progress. If you read the book, if you have questions or whatever, happy to hear from you. And I think you've got all my socials. And
we will put that all in the links below in the comment section, but we'll do a whole write-up on the website with all of your info again and again. And just thank you guys for watching, and please share this video with all of your family and friends, even if you think they might not be interested. I mean, I think this topic is pretty addictive, to be honest.
This is why we're going to be excellent friends.
Yes, exactly. So we will let's talk about that whole camel recipe for parties. Let's come up with some ideas. I think we should work on that. I don't know what we could come up with, but I'm confident we will come up with something.
That's a great idea. And I'm undergoing a kitchen remodel right now. I'm in the middle of the misery. So once it's done, maybe we'll do something and share it with everyone who's watching.
Yeah, I think camel milk recipes are on the horizon. All right, Christina, thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and we will see each other soon, inshallah.
Thank you, Yvonne.
Assalamu alaikum. Bye, everybody.